and welcome to another edition of Two Steps Ahead podcast, encouraging you, my friend, to take your passion, make it happen, let yourself be great. I'm Son Edom, and as you know, education is still on the forefront of a lot of things going on in this country. Obviously, the Department of Education is on the chopping block. What does that mean? We have a lot of information that keeps coming our way, but are we really understanding what's going on? I mean, I talked to a lot of different educators, and there's a lot of concern about laws going away if the Department of Education is indeed gutted or eliminated. There's a question about funding, like funding, is that going to go away? How is the Department of Education going to create money? And so I thought that's something we can kind of continue the conversation, because education is important. And we've talked about it recently, how the latest trends in education, as far as the testing goes with reading, math, and science, it still continues to slide. In fact, it's down, I think, below levels all across the board in all states except one. And those levels have dropped below the 2019 pre-pandemic era scores. The only state that's gone up is Louisiana, and they went back to basics. But again, education on the front burner of everybody's mind. And if you think education isn't important, then perhaps you should listen to this.
Do you know how many stars there are on the U.S. flag?
52.
Yes. What state is Utah in?
Michigan.
Yes. Do you know what state Utah is in?
Utah, to be honest with you, I never heard of that place ever in my life. I live under a rock.
Can you name 3 countries besides the USA?
I suck at history. I was like, my worst subject. Can we do like science?
No. Any three, you know this.
A country? Oh my jeez, this is terrible. Oh my god. A country. Wait, besides the U.S.?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't.
All right, it's fine.
I can't do history. I can't.
Do you know how many dimes there are in the dollar? Make up $1.
A dime is the 10 cent or the 5 cent?
You tell me.
I don't know.
Can you name 3 countries besides the USA?
Damn.
Any 3. You know this.
Canada? New Mexico. Right? That's good?
Yeah.
Damn, I need one more. Damn.
Yeah, so you got Canada, New Mexico, and what?
Damn. I need to go back to school.
Do you know how many states there are in total in the U.S.?
100.
How many continents are there?
3.
Continents?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you know what 2 countries border the U.S.?
So bordered?
Yeah, like on the borders.
The only borders I know is Puerto Rico and Mexico.
Now, I would hope to think that that is fake and made up, but unfortunately, it's a real man on the street conversation with somebody asking these basic questions. How many stars on the flag? Now, maybe under Obama's America, because he responded in a speech with 52 states, the lady would be correct. But again, we know that each star represents a state, and therefore there's 50. But that's education in America today. And with the Department of Education, with scores, the latest scores ending 2024 showing a downslide in reading, math, and science, America really is in trouble. I've had conversations with fellow educators, and I don't know if they're blinded by their political ideology, if they're just not really doing the research and reading the news, if they're just being misled. Because I've heard conversations of people talking about how if the Department of Education goes away, then all those laws, like Title IX laws and so forth, go away. And then there's like funding, like all the funding's going to dry up for all these things. And I'm thinking to myself, don't you know that Congress is the place that makes the laws? Congress is the place that controls the budget and the money. Congress is where it's all at. So if the Department of Education goes away, the only thing that will change is the manner by which the money is possibly distributed and perhaps how they do FAFSA, federal funding for colleges, because now all funding is done at the federal level for colleges. And so there'll be a few things that will be tweaked, but all the laws for special education, all the funding, and in fact, there'll probably be more funding because there'll be more money available because all the big salaries and all the money that goes to the overhead administrative costs of running the Department of Education will go away. Or even if the Department of Education isn't gutted completely or basically closed down, maybe it's just gutted to bare bones, that would be enough to save a lot of money. But then not only do you have teachers that are kind of confused about what's going on, or like I said, just blindly believe in an ideological perspective that's misinformed because a lot of these things aren't going to change. You've got the head of the American Federation of Teachers coming out recently being really angry over the Department of Education elimination. And this, shortly a few months ago, she came out and said that her members don't really care. So why all of a sudden the change? Well, she went on some television show somewhere and said it's a disaster symbolically as much as a disaster in reality if the Department of Education goes away. Now, the Department of Education, according to her, she argues, comes from its implementation of programs like Title I, which supports funding for students who are underachieving in areas with high poverty, and with the Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA, a federal law that gives disabled children a free education that is tailored to their needs. Now, again, maybe this is the source of that misinformation or untruths, deliberate or otherwise, because, again, money isn't going anywhere. It's just going to be distributed directly to the school districts, to the states. Because don't you know that a majority of what goes on in the school districts and in the schools across the country is at a local level, state and local level, the school districts themselves, the curriculum that each school district is going to implement, the states and their hiring process and what is necessary for them for teachers to be hired, whether it's accreditation, whether it's certifications, whatever it is. California is different from places in the Midwest like Nebraska. Things are different. If you're in Illinois, if you're a private school, if you're a public school, some places in California, last I knew, public schools, you didn't need a teaching credential from the state of California. But if you go to a place like Nebraska, private schools, you need a teaching credential, an endorsement of some sort. Again, private schools in California, you don't. So things are different. So yeah, public schools, you may need that accreditation all across the board. Then what about homeschool? Homeschool is a completely different thing. So again, you've got all these different entities and a lot of different things would be affected by it, but not directly, more indirectly. But you've got the teachers union coming out, the head of the teachers union coming out and saying that there's going to be a big problem if this happens. Also, you take a look at DEI and what's going on with DEI. Rhonda Weingarten, otherwise known as Randy, comes out and says the true meaning of DEI is opportunity. It's so we can create that ladder of opportunity so we can make sure kids can succeed, poor kids, kids with disabilities, kids who want to go to a career like career tech or tech ed, kids who are first generation college goers, and so on. Get that scholarship money. Now, that's fine and dandy, but again, what happens when you've got a place like the Department of Education that has funding that they're going to be distributing that they get from Congress, but you have the strings attached to that education or to that money, the educational strings that you have to abide by in order to get that money. She goes on to say they're just taking opportunity away from kids that don't have that opportunity. And she goes on to talk about billionaire kids and how they go to private schools and so forth. But not too long ago, I think it was back in November, Weingarten seemed to have a different opinion. She said, quote, I mean, my members don't really care about whether they have a bureaucracy of the Department of Education or not. And in fact, when the Department of Education came into place in 1979, after Jimmy Carter brought it into existence with the stroke of a pen executive order, the American Federation of Teachers, they were opposed to the creation. So they're opposed to it, but now they're for it, and we can't get away from it. Kind of like these politicians that are running around and getting rid of their Teslas because, they want to save the climate change, so they buy electric vehicles. But now that Elon Musk is on the other side of the aisle, saving people in space, providing communications for people that have been afflicted by the hurricanes and stuff, things that the government can't do. He's doing that, and now they're getting rid of their Teslas and their electric vehicles in favor of gas guzzling Tahoes and stuff, because apparently getting rid of Elon Musk Tesla is more important now than saving the environment. And that's what they do. They go back and forth from one thing to the next. And so when you take a look at this, you've got the back and forth. And I think that's where it's coming from the top, where there's mixed messages. And teachers, they're out there busy. They're out there busy working, trying to educate children. And so they maybe join the union because they think they have to, or maybe they have that kind of liberal ideology in them, so they want to. But the American Federation of Teachers, a recent federal filing showed that 36% of the national union spending went towards the representation of teachers. More than 2/3 of its own employees made six-figure salaries. So you have the American Federation of Teachers, the union, taking all this due money, and about 1/3 of it is spent back on the teachers across the country. 2/3 of it goes to paying high salaries and everything else. So does it make you wonder that the American Federation of Teachers, the union, might lose power, might lose a grip, might lose the ability to influence? Because again, what happens? Choice. If you have just money allocated to you from the government to the states can use it how they see fit. If they want to provide money for private schools, they want to provide funding for homeschools. If they want to provide school vouchers and have that money go to students that maybe want to skip the public school and go to the private school, states can formulate however they want the money to be used and allocated accordingly. Well, if the Department of Education is in place, and depending on who's running it, you can add strings to that. No, it can't go to this. No, it can't go to that. You have to do this. You have to create DEI in order to have this money. And so basically the Department of Education becomes kind of like a pawn of pawns, because it is a pawn of the government that then is used to manipulate everything else under it for that dollar. So if the money goes straight back to the states, they can do with it as they see fit. And again, what is wrong with school choice? I have to ask that. I mean, we saw with the latest NAEP tests from 2024, the national testing, that in 4th and 8th grade, everybody's on the downslide. Places like Illinois, practically the entire state is below proficiency at grade level in math, in reading, and in science when you look at science. So again, not a one-size-fits-all problem, as there are teachers out there doing great jobs. There are teachers out there that are doing the best, going the extra mile, doing everything they can, have the concerns and cares of their students at heart. Just like on the flip side, you got people that don't care. Teachers that are just waiting for retirement to kick in. They're buying their years, just trying to get through another year or two for retirement, just half-assing it. Or people that are more of the political ideological persuasion, and they're using education to try to influence to their side. There's all different kinds. But when it comes down to it, the kids then become the pawns in this whole thing. And if we were student-centric in the education that we provided, we'd be coming up with all kinds of different things that would be beneficial for the student, whether it's school choice, because, maybe in their inner city school, it's not cutting it. Maybe because you've got a family with multiple kids, they can't afford the private schools. So maybe they don't want to send their kids to the public schools. because maybe the public schools are underperforming. So they keep them at home and homeschool them. So there's a lot of different ways you can educate, and one isn't necessarily better than the other. I mean, look at schools. If you're in school, what are you doing? Well, you get there, and maybe if it's an elementary school, maybe the first 10 minutes or so, depending on the class and the age, maybe you're just kind of warming up. Maybe you're doing a warm-up exercise. Maybe you're just kind of putting your stuff away, and maybe you're finishing your breakfast snack and getting ready for the day. Then you have your reading, your math. You go to recess, you go to lunch. Maybe you have quiet time. Maybe you're doing desk work. And if you get done with your desk work, you can have iPad time. There's a lot of time during the day that is downtime. Go back out to recess. By the way, kids today do not get enough recess. I don't understand that. I don't know how they're supposed to sit for 6.5 hours a day and expect to just sit still when you have like maybe a 15, 20-minute recess. Maybe go and get some lunch at the cafeteria for about 20 minutes. And the rest of the time, unless you have a PE class, you're sitting in the classroom somewhere. Whereas if you're homeschooled, you can utilize a lot of downtime that you see in the classroom for other things. And you can incorporate field trips on a regular basis, family vacations to certain places, let's say like Gettysburg, just for example, off the top of my head. Family trip to Gettysburg is a historical lesson. So there's a lot of things you can do as a homeschooled student, person, family that you can't do at the school level. Now, of course, there's different resources at the school level, such as maybe a psychologist or maybe a speech path, things like that, that might be able to be to help a student navigate maybe a learning disability or other type of disabilities that might be occurring in their world. So there's good for both. There's pros for both sides. There's cons for both sides. But ultimately, it should come down to the parent and the parent's choice. And so the Department of Education, if they are withholding funds, then aren't they doing a disservice? Because here, according to Randy Weingarten, she wants everything to be at the public school level so she can control it. But if we're taking away advantages, we're taking away from the disadvantage money to do things, well, wouldn't homeschools be a disadvantage because they don't have resources and money to do things? Private schools funded by the people that pay the tuition. So again, we go back to the NAEP testing scores for grade level proficiency in math and reading specifically, but also if you throw in science, that would be the case too. It's all on the downslide. And again, the only state that's improved is Louisiana. They went up significantly. They went back to basics, phonics, phonemic awareness. But when you take a look at the Teachers Federation, the union, 36% of the dues are spent back on the representation. And that's in 2024. So the AFT spent more than $38 million on political activities and lobbying. $38 million what if that went back to the classroom? What if classroom resources were being used with that $38 million, but instead $38 million goes to political activities and lobbying? And I wonder how many of those activities and lobbying groups are people related to the upper echelon of the teachers union. More than 2/3 of the union's own officers and employees make six-figure salaries. The union spent more than $3.8 million on travel and hotels for unspecified purposes in 2024. So you're looking at over $40 million being spent on political activities and lobbying and travel, hotels for unexpected purposes. And that's what you're looking at. Well, what else do they spend their money on? Well, the union spent more than $277 million in 2024, but yet just $100 million was on representational activities. What's the core purpose of a union? Well, to protect the members, right? The members' interest. But no, apparently less than half of the money raised by the teachers union, the AFT, went to went back to the teachers. Now, if you put this into perspective, they say the Better Business Bureau's Wise Giving Alliance, which is some think tank somewhere, states that at least 65% of a nonprofit's total expenses should be on program activities, while the teachers union only uses 36% on program activities. And then, of course, they spend $38 million on politics, which has nothing to do with union representation, but lobbying probably for the Department of Education to manipulate them into how to give money. The union reported spending more than $38 million on political activities and lobbying, with the largest recipient being the New York State United Teachers Advocacy Fund with nearly $6 million. So one state gets $6 million. The union also funneled millions of dollars to self-proclaimed aggressive entities or progressive entities. $2.35 million for Our Future Action Fund, which bills itself as committed to serving progressive values. $200,000 to the Congressional Progressive Caucus, which is chaired by Congresswoman Jaya Powell, and the deputy chair of Ilhan Omar. That tells you everything you need to know about that. $103,000 to Democracy Alliance, which claims to be the country's preeminent network of individual political philanthropists, labor unions, and foundations that come together to advance progressive policy reforms. Now, I guess if you join the union, I guess you are knowing that your money is going towards these different entities, and I guess that's your choice. But would you rather not have that money come back to you or benefit you? Maybe it doesn't come back to you directly as in the form of a paycheck, but maybe more resources in the classroom, maybe upgrades in the classroom. I mean, how many times do schools, even public schools, have to have fundraisers in order to raise money for specific things, upgrades? Money is limited, we know that, but why can't some of this money go back to the schools? Because apparently we can't do that. So you've got $38 million in politics, you've got 38 or $3.8 million in travel expenses, and you've got a boatload of money in salaries. So Rhonda Weingarten, otherwise known as Randy, according to, I think this is even back in 2021. I think this was the latest information I could find. Made $487,000, almost $488,000 in compensation. Although I think I read somewhere that it was closer to $600,000 in 2024. But we'll go by this because this is stuff that I pulled off their website. $487,000. The secretary treasurer, total compensation of $402,000. So $800,000, almost $1 million going towards the salary of two people. Then you have the senior director of organizational field services, $326,000. The executive vice president, $310,000. The senior national rep, $285,000. A director, $280,000. Assistant to the executive VP, $276,000. Another senior director of organizational field services, $268,000. Chief financial officer, $255,000. Another director of something, $255,000, and a senior national representative, $254,000. So that's about what, 8 to 10 people making well into the six figures. In fact, $487,000 is more than the president. Isn't that at $400,000 now? So you got a lot of people making a lot of money. For doing what? You ever ask yourself what Randy Weingarten does besides live a life of luxury, going on TV, friendly interviews, catching a microphone anytime she can, spouting into the microphone? I mean, really, what does she do? I would ask. What does the senior director of organized field services? So you have all this right here. money going towards the teachers union. And this is the education it produces.
Do you know who fought in the Civil War?
Who fought in the Civil War? Like from the president?
No, like who against who?
It was the Nazis versus Germany. No. Yes. No. I'm gonna say yes, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. You actually just guessed that?
Nah, yeah. I'm kind of smart.
You didn't know that? Oh. Did they teach you that in school or what?
They taught me it, but I just guessed it now. But
Yeah, so
it's like I forgot, but
yeah,
I mean,
it was probably in the back of your head and like it came up.
yeah.
How many Kardashian sisters can you name?
Kendall Jenner, Kylie Jenner, Kim Kardashian, Khloe Kardashian, Kourtney Kardashian. Is that all? That's all.
Yeah, that's all of them for sure.
Smart.
Yeah, dude, you're a genius. How many seasons are there?
May, June, July, August, September, October, December. 8? No,
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I said 8.
Yes.
Now, again, I hope that's fake and stage, but probably not. That's the education we are getting in America today. People know more about the Kardashians than they do about anything else or pop culture. Remember, more people were outraged, emotional, crying, distraught when TikTok went away. You throw anything else out there, they don't care. A little flag on a post, we stand with Ukraine. A flag and a post, we stand with Hamas. But when TikTok goes away, we have full-on meltdowns. Social media is all we live for. So the growing discontent with American education. According to studies, enrollment in U.S. colleges and universities peaked in 2010. It's on the downslide, a decline ever since. A quarter of students in K through 12 schools are now chronically absent. And there are many factors. I mean, you've got mental health issues. You've got, they still claiming pandemic related issues. Although, when do we stop having pandemic hangovers? I mean, 5, 10, 15 years, another generation. 10 years from now, we're going to say, oh, students aren't learning because of the pandemic, even though the kids in school at the time probably weren't even born during the pandemic. Many factors, but a big factor is the fact that kids just aren't happy. They're discontented. When you're competing with the Kardashians, how is world history going to be exciting? And so you've got terms like exciting, engaging, and relevant that are non-existent according to students when they describe education. When you ask parents and employers. Boring comes to mind, outdated, disconnected. 26% of U.S. adults who have experienced higher education strongly agree their coursework is relevant to their work and day-to-day life. A mere 13% of K through 12 students give their school an A grade on making them more excited about learning. So yeah, school is not exciting. It's not engaging. We sit in a room with 4 walls, and maybe depending upon the creativity and enthusiasm of your teacher, you may get some stuff on the walls. Alphabet, numbers 1 through 9, and then maybe a 0 somewhere. If you're in high school, maybe you get stuff on the wall. But again, you're looking at an environment that is pretty much yesterday. Now, there's a lot of things we need to learn, obviously, from the man on the street. But how does a school remain relevant when it provides little exposure to the real world? I mean, everybody can just pull out their phone and get an answer. People can pull out their phone and be engaged. First, it was the Twitter, 128 characters. Now we have to start thinking about students because students were only used to 128 characters. Now we move forward to, it was a 60-second video, but now I think a lot of platforms have moved it to 3-minute videos and maybe a little bit more now as technology grows. But again, when you've got modern day media, you've got video games, you've got, like I said, now X and TikTok and YouTube Shorts. How do you keep the attention span of someone, of a child, especially, let's say, elementary school age, when they all have iPads, they all have their games, Khan Academy, and whatever that they're playing, and that's more exciting than the lectures. I can't tell you how many times I've sat there and tried to sit in an elementary school classroom and run a reading group as a sub, and the group goes like this. The teacher's at the desk, the kidney table with students, and then this group is supposed to be working by themselves doing something, this group working by themselves doing something else, and this group, but do they do anything? Absolutely not. Most of the time, I'm like, hey, sit down, be quiet, do your work. Hey, you shouldn't be doing that, and nothing gets done. And I've seen that not only with myself trying to run the class, because again, if you're a sub in a classroom, it's a completely different world. I get that. But I've also seen teachers, classroom teachers, struggle with the same thing. I walk in maybe as support to kind of help out, and she's doing her table work. I'm trying to help one group. These two groups over here are clowning around. So again, is that method really working? Not a condemnation to the teachers because they're trying. But again, we could go back to, how about more support in the classroom? How about volunteers coming in? How about people that maybe are retirees coming in, or seniors and juniors in high school coming in, volunteer work, community service type things? You can use resources in the community to help. Now, that might not be the case in all schools and all districts, but again, there's got to be something. There's got to be something to be able to reach out to the community, to be able to help the classroom environment. There's only so many people you can hire. But again, how do you make it relevant with fast-moving technologies? How do you make it real-world relevant? Well, someone suggested you got to kind of come up with the art and science of teaching again. And when you're teaching political ideology and other ideologies, how does that help the classroom? How does that help the student? You look at a lot of teachers and they get their master's degrees, and that's great, but what are you getting it in? Social justice for K through 3. Well, how does that help the classroom environment? Educational leadership. Great. And I'm not condemning any of these, but it's like, how does that help the classroom? What can we do to get classroom development? Again, and I go back to the simplest of things. If you went through a teaching credential program, I asked this question because I can't answer it because I haven't taken every single educational teacher program that there is in the entire world. But I ask you, have they ever taught about classroom management when it comes to how to handle an active shooter, how to handle a natural disaster, maybe an earthquake, maybe a tornado, maybe flash flooding, maybe a fire? Have they taught you how to handle a crisis situation? Like literally how to handle it? Or did they even address it at all? Or do you just learn it at PD? Or do you just learn it because you did it in elementary school yourself? But no, I never went through that. I've had professional development where I've learned things to do, but it's not dwelt upon. Outside of a fire drill, do you practice it? Because, see, we become complacent and just say, oh, fire drill, we got to go outside. Fire drill, go outside. And then, honest, there's a few times there's been fire drills where maybe I'm on my break. I'm not in the classroom, or I'm in the classroom and the door is locked because I don't want any students in. Fire drill goes off, I stay in the classroom. I'm going to march out to the parking lot in the middle of winter when it's 20 degrees and stand out there. I'll stay in the classroom because we take it only to a certain degree of seriousness, because we know it's not going to be true, but we don't learn these things. How about just a problem child? Difficulties. I mean, you talk about things like ADHD and other learning disabilities. And what about just the fact that boys, for example, don't want to sit still for a very long time? You got to be up, active, moving, especially elementary school age, or anybody for that matter. I mean, I got a watch on my wrist that tells me when I need to stand up. I've been sitting too long. But yet we expect kids to sit. And at least at the maybe middle school or high school level, they're getting up between classes and supposedly walking to their next class. But again, a lot of sitting, a lot of energy being built up. And yet students, and I've seen it, I've seen teachers not know how to handle that situation. And they try to do a kind of by the book thing. And maybe if there is such thing as by the book, it doesn't work. It requires outside the box thinking at times. I've been able to step into a situation, and I'm not saying I'm perfect or great at it. It just happened to work out this 1, 2, 3 times, whatever. I'm able to walk in a situation with some kind of outside the box, maybe solution, and it works for a time. But you got to be able to handle these situations. We're not prepared. And so when you look at not only the boring, outdated, not connected to the real world situation that a lot of teachers or parents or students convey in these surveys, how do you make it relevant? You have also these other issues you have to contend with while trying to make it relevant. According to the Department of Labor and the Department of Education, apparently a U.S. student will take 112 mandatory standardized tests across their K through 12 education. Yet there's no national measure of student engagement, exposure to experimental education, or work-integrated learning. So again, 112 mandatory standardized tests. And what does that get you? A lot of times we teach to the test. So what are some things that we could incorporate to make it worldly relevant? Well, what about just finance? Yeah, I know we teach math, and I know you can only do so much unless you know math. But by the time you get to middle school, for example, everybody should be able to add and subtract. Should, right? Maybe do some decimal points. What about just doing some budget keeping? Getting them to open a bank account. Learn to save. Theoretically, I mean, in high school, we had to take an economics class and we had to buy fake stock, like in real life. We had to buy stock and we had X amount of dollars, what we're going to invest it in. And we had to watch it throughout the semester. Obviously, we didn't make any money off of it because it was all theoretical, but it gave us a little insight into the stock market. Who knows how that affected people? What about credit? Do you know what your credit card statement is? 18%, 18.99%. Do you know how that's calculated? Or if you're going to get a loan, do you know how that's calculated? The compound interest and all that, variable versus a variable rate versus a fixed rate, things like that. People don't know that. They get into financial trouble. What about savings with interest rates or just investing in general? See, we had my senior year, we had someone from, I think, what would be the equivalent of today being like a Charles Schwab or TD Rowe, one of those investment places. I don't remember what it was at the time. But they came in and they taught our economics class. It was a real life working non-teacher teacher. And so we learned a few things. What about trade skills? Yeah, you might have a 6-week little thing on home ec or wood shopping or something, but what about literally teaching the basics? What about how to use the different tools? Sure, pick up a hammer, hit a nail, but there's a proper way to hit a nail. Because most people, you watch This Old House, they'll tell you should be able to hit a nail in 2 hits. Everyone else is sitting there pounding, straightening the nail, pounding again, straightening again. Or the wrenches. Ever tried to use a socket wrench and figure out which socket wrench to use? Sometimes they come in metric. What's the metric system? Don't know that. What about just reading a tape measure? Very few people know how to read a tape measure. Or properly use what if you say, give me a screwdriver? You say, give me a Phillips. Do you even know what that is? What about just basic plumbing, electrician, maybe computer aided drafting, maybe more AI? What if we should get into the AI? Well, what about just car maintenance? Basic car maintenance. Check the tires for pressure. You're in cold weather. Tires deflate because of the cold weather. Explain some things. These are ways that you can incorporate in high school, especially, maybe middle school, and allow them to learn some things that are real world. What about something like home economics, sewing, patching up things, cooking? Obviously, people got to eat. Maybe if we taught kids how to cook when they're at home by themselves because their parents are working 2-3 jobs, instead of door dashing everything to make them obese, they know how to cook something healthier than DoorDash. Doing their laundry, ironing. What about learning how to pay rent? Being responsible in those areas, developing responsibilities besides just turning in your schoolwork. Drones. Drones are a big thing now. Drone technology, AI, automation, computer programming. There's a lot of things that schools can do now that probably would not take a lot of money, that would be able to benefit them and make it more relatable. At least have a small, that's not, because again, what do you have? You have art, you have PE, you have music. Those are the 3 kind of basic things that you have, right? Maybe there's another one I'm missing somewhere. But what if you were able to do something different, something more of an interest that you want to take, more of an elective, and it wasn't just, once a week or something like that? Schools can do it. They can be creative. So why the U.S. education system has been a failure since the shift to federal control. Remember, 1979, according to some reports, and it's all debatable, obviously, but a lot of people thought the U.S. education system was the best in the world prior to 1979 and even through the early 80s. But then you started to have a federalized educational system, and things have gotten to where we are today. We don't know the seasons. Instead, we count off months. We don't know how much a dime is. We don't know anything. So before 1979, according to reports, why things were so successful, because we had tailored educational strategies. Basically, depending on your need, the need of your students, where you were located, the cultures, economics, all that. You had flexibility before the Department of Education came along to educate these students. You can't tell me that people in Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago would have the same educational experience as a place in maybe small town, Midwest farming town. Some of those places, those people are going to take over family farms, work in the agribusiness. You would think that perhaps some agribusiness could be implemented into the curriculum of some of these schools, whereas perhaps something else in the schools of the big cities, you were able to manipulate it. And it became more engaging. You could literally walk out of a classroom in a small town in agricultural land and conduct experiments, whereas in the big city, you probably couldn't do the same thing. But you could create relevant and engaging curriculum for higher engagement and achievement before the Department of Education, according to reports. Also, innovation and experimentation. When you had less oversight, state and local districts, they kind of served as laboratories for educational innovation. You could experiment. You could try things out. Does this work? Does that work? We've talked about it before on a program where there was a lady in Iowa, teacher, I think it was 3rd grade. She taught an experiment on racism. And what she did was she had a group of kids, blue-eyed versus brown-eyed. And one day the blue-eyed students were superior, the brown-eyed students were inferior. And the dynamic that took place. The next day she swapped it, and she was surprised that the brown-eyed, even though they were kind of the inferior group the day before, they treated the blue-eyes the same way the blue-eyes treated them the day before. They didn't learn their lesson. An innovation, an experimentation into racial equality. And this was in a small town in Iowa with a bunch of white students and a white teacher, but yet they learned the value of equality. As an example. What about community involvement? We're always talking about that. But back to experimentation and innovation, again, you do have some situations where maybe technology, integration, but see, that's where when you give the money straight to the schools and the districts and the states, they can use how they see fit. If you're the Department of Education, you say, you've got to use this money for X, Y, Z. If you're in a small rural town, how are you going to use that if it doesn't fit you? Now you got to create things and waste time and money trying to fulfill a DEI requirement when you could be using that same money for something that is engaging to the student, that they're going to be doing when they grow up. Another reason that perhaps the Department of Education should be done away with, or at least gutted. What about community involvement, though? I've been talking about this for a while. Community involvement, connection between schools and the communities, such as parents, maybe local businesses, civic leaders. How that would affect curriculum development, education. What if you had a business leader, president of a bank, come in, talk to the students about banking, finance? What if you had somebody from maybe a food bank come in, talk about, volunteer services, helping out the community, grocery store, nutritionist, how to search and eat, look for proper foods, proper produce, expiration dates, whatever. Just ideas being thrown out there. Because you have community involvement, you can bring those civic leaders, businessmen, and other people in and educate. Because again, please tell me, outside of academia, when was the last time you used the Pythagorean theorem? I think the last time I used the Pythagorean theorem was in college trying to pass a test, so I'd never have to use it again. I'm not saying there's a time and a place for it, but the common person doesn't know it. If we're teaching that, should we not also then teach things that are going to be applicable to everyday lives? What about diversity in educational offerings? Catering to different learning styles, career aspirations, comprehensive educational pathways. Again, inner city, big city, small rural community, New York, Illinois, California versus Kansas, the Dakotas, Iowa. It's different. There are some things that universally people should know. Maybe we should know some history. Obviously, we should know reading. We should improve our science. I mean, we have people right now, Elon Musk and his crew went to the space station, a private corporation, private entity, went to the space station and are retrieving astronauts stuck in space that the U.S. government could not rescue. Private entities doing that. That's the importance of things like science, math, technology. It's all important. How can we make it relevant? Obviously, Elon Musk is brilliant, so he's able to do all that with the brilliance that he has and creating all that. I couldn't do that. But again, and now we have people sitting there and wanting to do away with Elon Musk, and he's actually rescuing people. People hate Elon Musk. Why? He's rescuing people in space. He is exposing waste, fraud, and corruption of your taxpayer dollars, by the way, at the federal level. If I did that, if I took money, your taxpayer money, and did that, I'd probably be arrested. But he's exposing that without taking a penny. He's provided through Starlink, when the hurricane came through for North Carolina and other places, communication that the U.S. government could not do. Look what he's doing. He's doing things that the U.S. government can't do or wouldn't do. He's making a difference, changing lives. Is that not the type of innovation? Is that not the type of education? Is that not the type of student that we should be trying to produce? And maybe it's not technology. Maybe it's something else. But that's what it is. And then local accountability. So prior to 1979, you had tailored educational strategies, innovation and experimentation, community involvement, diversity in educational offerings, teacher autonomy. They had greater freedom to design teaching methods. I can't tell you how many things. One reason why I like to teach at the community college level is you get a little bit more freedom, teacher autonomy, to do things. You might have to follow a certain protocols and things, but coming up with lessons and stuff, you kind of get your own way of doing things, and you can be creative. That's what I enjoy, and that's why I stick with it. Now, reasons for decline. So since 1979, according to people, you've had uniform policy approaches like No Child Left Behind, Common Core, standardized educational models that do not meet diverse education across the states. So instead of having innovation and creativity, you have federal benchmarks, 112 standardized tests to perform for one student when they go through K through 12. You have bureaucratic overgrowth, an increase in federal bureaucracy, shifting resources from the classroom to administration overhead. More compliance requirements detract from educational quality and innovation. A focus on standardized testing. Again, 112 standardized tests a student will take when they've completed K through 12. Teaching to the test. Narrows educational focus on what can be easily measured potentially at the expense of critical thinking, creativity, and practical skills. I can't tell you how many times problem solving. People cannot problem solve. Problem solving is the number one skill that people should learn. When I was teaching at a community college, radio broadcasting, I input or created lessons that had problems. And I wanted to see if they could figure it out. Because in the radio world, if you're sitting at the radio station and you're a board operator and you're running the controls, things are going to go bad. Things will happen. Technology will break down. Programs won't be put in. There will be problems. Not enough commercials to fill the spots. There will be problems. So I created assignments that had problems in that. And students would freak out. Taught them how to not panic, but how to solve problems, problem-solving skills. We don't have it. People panic, freak out. They can't problem solve. And even to this day, in other classrooms and academia that I teach, there are no problem-solving skills. In real life, no problem-solving skills. Just look at TikTok and how that debacle, when it was going away, led people into meltdowns. And then, of course, another decline was policy and leadership. Again, you have America 2000, Goals 2000, No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top, and all these layers of federal control that critics argue have not effectively improved educational outcomes. So, if you did away with the Department of Education, you could have decentralization, you could reduce federal bureaucracy, you can get back to local curriculum development that suits the needs of the people at the places they're at. You can bring back community involvement, which I've been saying for a while now. You can have more innovation and experimentation. Teachers can be empowered to do things more and not be so stifled by bureaucracy. And then what about evaluation methods? You know, moving away from standardized tests and actually teaching so they learn as opposed to teaching to a test. And so that's where we sit with education right now. You've got the NAEP, math, reading scores, and even if you want to throw in science, below grade level, especially fourth and eighth grade where they test primarily. That's across the board. You've got states that have declined to below pre-pandemic levels. And you can make all the excuses you want. We're 5 years away from the pandemic. I mean, you've got people that could be in second grade right now. Maybe they started kindergarten, the 22-23 school year, 23-24, 24-25. They're now in second grade. I think some of those younger classes, maybe even third and fourth grade, maybe fourth graders now, don't think the pandemic really is an issue. And if you're in high school and you're still blaming the pandemic, should not have kids that were ninth grade, eighth grade, and now they're seniors, should that not have caught up by then? So again, a lot of issues, a lot of problems that still need to be solved. But it might require some outside the box thinking. It might require getting back to basics like the state of Louisiana so that you can see learning take place. So when you have political issues going on, and let's just call it that, Department of Education going away, and you have people like Randy Weingarten sitting out there and saying this one minute, saying that another minute, crying this, crying that. And then you actually have teachers saying, wow, I can't believe it. The Department of Education goes away. We're going to lose Title I, Title IX. No child left behind. All these, no, we're not. Schools aren't going to be funded. No, they're not. Learn. Most everything, education-wise, is at the state and local level. Property taxes feed a lot of educational expenses at the state level. The federal funding for college tuitions through FAFSA stuff, yeah, that's at the federal level. And sure, the Department of Education may distribute money, but Congress controls the power of money. They make the laws. If a entity like the Department of Education goes away, those laws don't go away. State laws don't go away. States can still determine what it takes to be a teacher, hire who they want to hire, develop curriculum. It's all done at the state and local level. But over the years, it's become manipulated by the puppet master holding the money, saying you need to do it this way in order to get these funds. If you do away with that, get the money directly to the states, let them do it. If you don't like how a state's doing it, well, frankly, you can move 49 other states, or you can run for office and try to make change. There are other ways you can do it. But ultimately, it should go back to the fact that students should come first. Student education and learning should come first, and students should not be a pawn in the educational system abused for the purposes of some ideological victory. We got to put students first and learning first if we want to be able to see the next generation grow up and be better off than what we are. This is Two Steps Ahead podcast, encouraging you. Take your passion, make it happen. Let yourself be great. Hey, check out our website, radiowarp.com. That's radio, W-A-R-P, radiowarp.com. You can click on the Two Steps Ahead podcast show logo. All of our past shows pop up in video form from our Rumble account. You can check them out. You can also see the orange banner that goes across the center of the page. You click on that, takes you to our SoundCloud account, our audio version of the show. You can download those episodes and take them with you on the go. There are also some other entities on the website that you might enjoy, like a music show, The Beat Goes On, for example, or another podcast, Sanctified Reason. All you have to do is click on those show logos to access those shows. So lots of things there to see. We're also on social media, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the places. You can also listen anywhere you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify, Pandora, iHeartMedia, Apple Podcasts. Hey Siri, hey Google, hey Alexa, play TWO, Two Steps Ahead podcast, and we pop up. You can email the show. Email is twostepsaheadpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, the 2 is TWO. You can reach out via direct message on any of our social media applications as well. But again, when you're taking a look at things, I would remind you that one good approach is to listen. Listen to what's being said. If you have to, go do the research. If someone comes up to you and says if the Department of Education goes away, then all the laws go away. All the money goes away. Everybody's going to be broke. And the kids with special needs, like special education kids, they're going to be kicked out of schools. And you hear all this stuff, which I've actually heard. Do the research. Don't just take it for what they say. Don't just listen to what you hear on TV or especially what you hear on social media. Investigate it. See if it's true. See if it's not. Do some investigation. Do some research. Do some learning. Then decide for yourself what you think it is, and then make a decision. It would save you and a bunch of people a lot of headache, especially if you're an educator. Educate yourself, and it'll be simpler on you. Two Steps Ahead podcast, encouraging you. Take your passion, make it happen. Let yourself be great. I'm Son Edom. Hey, thanks for listening. Do tell a friend. And until next time, God bless.